Chapter 5. Holden. 10 minutes at 2G and Holden's head was already starting to ache. But McDowell had called them home at all haste. The Canterbury was warming up its massive drive. Holden didn't want to miss his ride. "Jim, we may have a problem out here. Talk to me. Becca found something, and it is sufficiently weird to make my balls creep up. We're getting the hell out of here." "Alex, how long?" Holden asked for the third time in 10 minutes. "We're over an hour out. Want to go on the juice?" Alex said. Going on the juice was pilot speak for a high-G burn that would knock an unmedicated human unconscious. The juice was the cocktail of drugs the pilot's chair would inject into him to keep him conscious, alert, and hopefully stroke-free when his body weighed 500 kilos. Holden had used the juice on multiple occasions in the Navy, and coming down afterward was unpleasant. "Not unless we have to," he said. "What kind of weird?" "Becca, link him up. Jim, I want you to see what we're seeing." Holden tongued a painkiller tab from his suit's helmet and reran Becca's sensor feed for the 5th time. The spot in space lay about 200,000 kilometers from the Canterbury. As the Cant had scanned it, the readout showed a fluctuation, the gray-black false color gradually developing a warm border. It was a small temperature climb, less than 2 degrees. Holden was amazed Becca had even spotted it. He reminded himself to give her a glowing review the next time she was up for promotion. "Where did that come from?" Holden asked. "No idea. It's just a spot faintly warmer than the background," Becca said. "I'd say it was a cloud of gas because we get no radar return from it, but there aren't supposed to be any gas clouds out here. I mean, where would it come from?" "Jim, any chance the scopuli killed the ship that killed it? Could it be a vapor cloud from a destroyed ship?" McDowell asked. "I don't think so, sir. The scopuli is totally unarmed. The hole in her side came from breaching charges, not torpedo fire, so I don't think they even fought back. It might be where the scopuli vented, but... or maybe not. Come back to the barn, Jim. Do it now." "Naomi, what slowly gets hotter that gives no radar or LADAR return when you scan it? Wild-ass guess here," Holden said. Naomi said, giving herself time to think. "Anything that was absorbing the energy from the sensor package wouldn't give a return, but it might get hotter when it shed the absorbed energy." The infrared monitor on the sensor console next to Holden's chair flared like the sun. Alex swore loudly over the general comm. "Are you seeing that?" he said. Holden ignored him and opened a channel to McDowell. "Captain, we just got a massive IR spike," Holden said. For long seconds, there was no reply. When McDowell came on the channel, his voice was tight. Holden had never heard the old man sound afraid before. "Jim, a ship just appeared in that warm spot. It's radiating heat like a bastard," McDowell said. "Where the hell did that thing come from?" Holden started to answer, but then heard Becca's voice coming faintly through the captain's headset. "No idea, sir, but it's smaller than its heat signature. Radar shows frigate-sized," she said. "With what?" McDowell said. "Invisibility? Magical wormhole teleportation?" "Sir," Holden said, "Naomi was speculating that the heat we picked up might have come from energy-absorbing materials, stealth materials, which means that ship was hiding on purpose, which means its intentions are not good." As if in answer, 6 new objects appeared on his radar, glowing yellow icons appearing and immediately shifting to orange as the system marked their acceleration. On the Canterbury, Becca yelled out, "Fast movers, we have 6 new high-speed contacts on a collision course." "Jesus H. Christ on a pogo stick, did that ship just fire a spread of torpedoes at us?" McDowell said. "They're trying to slap us down?" "Yes, sir," Becca said. "Time to contact." "Just under 8 minutes, sir," she replied. McDowell cursed under his breath. "We've got pirates, Jim." "What do you need from us?" Holden said, trying to sound calm and professional. "I need you to get off the radio and let my crew work." "You're an hour out at best. The torpedoes are 8 minutes. McDowell out," the captain said, his comm clicking off and leaving Holden listening to the faint hiss of static. The general comm exploded with voices. Alex demanding to go on the juice and race the torpedoes to the cant, Naomi chattering about missile jamming strategies, Amos cursing at the stealth ship and questioning the parenting of its crew. Shed was the only quiet one. "Everyone shut up!" Holden yelled into his headset. The ship fell into shocked silence. "Alex, plot the fastest course to the cant that won't kill us. Let me know when you have it. Naomi, set up a 3-way channel with Becca, you, and me. We'll help however we can. Amos, keep cussing, but turn your mic off." He waited. The clock ticked toward impact. "Link is up," Naomi said. Holden could hear 2 distinct sets of background noise over the comm channel. "Becca, this is Jim. I've got Naomi on this channel too. Tell us what we can do to help." Naomi was talking about jamming techniques? "I'm doing everything I know to do," Becca said, her voice astonishingly calm. "They're painting us with a targeting laser. I'm broadcasting garbage to scramble it, but they've got really, really good shit. If we were any closer, that targeting laser would be burning a hole in our hull." "What about physical chaff?" Naomi asked. "Can you drop snow?" While Naomi and Becca talked, Jim opened a private channel to Ade. "Hey, this is Jim. I have Alex working on a fast burn solution so we can get there before the missiles turn us into a flying brick? Good idea. Taken by pirates isn't something you want to miss," Ade said. He could hear the fear behind the mocking tone. "Ade, please, I want to say something." "Jim, what do you think?" Naomi said on the other channel. Holden cursed. To cover, he said, about which thing?" "Using the night to try and draw those missiles," Naomi said. "Can we do that?" he asked. "Maybe. Were you listening at all?" Something happened here, drew my attention for a minute. Tell me again," Holden said. "We try to match the frequency of the light scatter coming off the cant and broadcast it with our comm array. Maybe the torpedoes will think we're the target instead," Naomi said like she was speaking to a child. "And then they come blow us up?" "I'm thinking we run away while pulling the torpedoes toward us. Then, when we get them far enough past the cant, we kill the comm array and try to hide behind the asteroid," Naomi said. "Won't work," Holden said with a sigh. "They follow the targeting laser scatter for general guidance, but they also take telescope shots of the target on acquisition. They'll take one look at us and know we aren't their target." "Isn't it worth a shot?" "Even if we manage it, torpedoes designed to disable the cant would make us into a greasy stretch of vacuum." "All right," Naomi said. "What else have we got?" "Nothing. Very smart boys in the naval labs have already thought of everything we're going to think of in the next 8 minutes, Holden said. Saying it out loud meant admitting it to himself. "Then what are we doing here, Jim?" Naomi asked. 7 minutes, Becca said, her voice still eerily calm. "Let's get there. Maybe we can get some people off the ship after it's hit. Help with damage control," Holden said. "Alex, got that plot figured out?" "Roger that, XO. Bleeding G, burn and flip laid in. Angled approach course so our torch won't burn a hole in the cant." "Time to rock and roll?" Alex replied. "Yeah. Naomi, get your people strapped in for high G," Holden said, then opened up a channel to Captain McDowell. "Captain, we're coming in hot. Try to survive and we'll have the night on station for pickup or to help with damage control." "Roger," McDowell said, and killed the line. Holden opened up his channel to Ade again. "Ade, we're going to burn hard so I won't be talking, but leave this channel open for me, okay? Tell me what's happening. Hell, hum. Humming is nice. I just really need to hear you're all right." "Okay, Jim," Ade said. She didn't hum, but she left the channel open. He could hear her breathing. Alex began the countdown over the general comm. Holden checked the straps on his crash couch and palmed the button that started the juice. A dozen needles stuck into his back through membranes in his suit. His heart shuddered, and chemical bands of iron gripped his brain. His spine went dead cold, and his face flushed like a radiation burn. He pounded a fist into the arm of the crash couch. He hated this part, but the next one was worse. On the general comm, Alex whooped as the drugs hit his system. Below decks, the others were getting the drugs that kept them from dying, but kept them sedated through the worst of it. Alex said, 1. And Holden weighed 500 kilos. The nerves at the back of his eye sockets screamed at the massive load of his eyeballs. His testicles crushed themselves against his thighs. He concentrated on not swallowing his tongue. Around him, the ship creaked and groaned. There was a disconcerting bang from below decks, but nothing on his panel went red. The Knight's torch drive could deliver a lot of thrust, but at the cost of a prodigious fuel burn rate. But if they could save the Cant, it wouldn't matter. Over the blood pounding in his ears, Holden could hear Ade's gentle breathing and the click of her keyboard. He wished he could just go to sleep to that sound, but the juice was singing and burning in his blood. He was more awake than he'd ever been. "Yes, sir," Ade said over the comm. It took Holden a second to realize she was talking to McDowell. He turned up the volume to hear what the captain was saying. "The main's online, full power." "We're fully loaded, sir. If we try to burn that hard, we'll tear the drive right off the mounts," Ade replied. McDowell must have asked her to fire up the Epstein. "Mr. Tukumbo," McDowell said, "we have 4 minutes. If you break it, I won't bill you." "Yes, sir. Bringing mains online. Setting for maximum burn," Ade said. And in the background, Holden could hear the high-G warning klaxon. There was a louder clicking as Ade strapped herself in. "Mains online in 3, 2, 1, execute," Ade said. The Canterbury groaned so loud Holden had to turn the comm volume down. It moaned and shrieked like a banshee for several seconds, and then there was a shattering crash. He pulled up the exterior visual, fighting against the G-induced blackout at the edge of his vision. The Canterbury was in one piece. "Ade, what the hell was that?" McDowell said, his speech slurred. "The drive tearing a strut. Mains are offline, sir," Ade replied, not saying exactly like I said would happen. "What did that buy us?" McDowell asked. "Not much. The torpedoes are now at over 40 clicks a second and accelerating. We're down to maneuvering thrusters," Ade said. "Shit," McDowell said. "They're going to hit us, sir," Ade said. "Jim," McDowell said, his voice suddenly loud over the direct channel he'd opened. "We're going down, and there's no way around it. Click twice to acknowledge." Jim clicked his radio twice. "Okay, so now we need to think about surviving after the hit. If they're looking to cripple us before boarding, they'll take out our drive and our comm array. Becca's been broadcasting an SOS ever since the torpedoes were fired, but I'd like you to keep yelling if we stop. If they know you're out there, they are less likely to toss everyone out an airlock. Witnesses, you know," McDowell said. Jim clicked twice again. "Turn around, Jim. Hide behind that asteroid. Call for help. Order." Jim clicked twice, then signaled all stop to Alex. In an instant, the giant sitting on his chest disappeared, replaced by weightlessness. The sudden transition would have made him throw up if his veins hadn't been coursing with anti-nausea drugs. "What's up?" Alex said. "New job," Holden said, teeth chattering from the juice. "We're calling for help and negotiating a release of prisoners once the bad guys have the Cant. Burn back to that asteroid, since it's the closest we can get to cover." "Roger that, boss," Alex said. He added in a lower voice, "I'd kill for a couple of tubes or a nice keel-mounted railgun right now." "I hear you. Wake up the kids downstairs? Let them sleep." "Roger that," Alex said. then clicked off. Before the heavy G started up again, Holden turned on the night's SOS. The channel to Ade was still open, and now that McDowell was off the line, he could hear her breathing again. He turned the volume all the way up and lay back in the straps, waiting to be crushed. Alex didn't disappoint him. 1 minute, Ade said, her voice loud enough to distort through his helmet speakers. Holden didn't turn the volume down. Her voice was admirably calm as she called out the impact countdown. 30 seconds. Holden wanted desperately to talk, to say something comforting, to make ludicrous and untrue assertions of love. The giant standing on his chest just laughed with the deep rumble of their fusion torch. 10 seconds. Get ready to kill the reactor and play dead after the torpedoes hit. If we're not a threat, they won't hit us again, McDowell said. 5, Ade said. 4, 3, 2, 1. The Canterbury shuddered, and the monitor went white. Ade took one sharp intake of breath, which cut off as the radio broke up. The static squeal almost ruptured Holden's eardrums. He chinned the volume down and clicked his radio at Alex. The thrust suddenly dropped to a tolerable 2G, and all the ship's sensors flared into overload. A brilliant light poured through the small airlock porthole. "Report, Alex, report. What happened?" Holden yelled. "My God! They nuked her. They nuked the Cant," Alex said, his voice low and dazed. "What's her status? Give me a report on the Canterbury. I have 0 sensors down here. Everything's just gone white." There was a long pause. Then Alex said, "I have 0 sensors up here too, boss. But I can give you a status on the Cant. I can see her." "See her? From here?" "Yeah. She's a cloud of vapor the size of Olympus Mons. She's gone, boss. She's gone." "That can't be right," Holden's mind protested. "That doesn't happen. Pirates don't nuke water haulers. No one wins. No one gets paid. And if you just want to murder 50 people, walking into a restaurant with a machine gun is a lot easier." He wanted to shout it, scream at Alex that he was wrong. But he had to keep it together. "I'm the old man now." "All right, new mission, Alex. Now we're witnesses to murder. Get us back to that asteroid. I'll start compiling a broadcast. Wake everyone up, they need to know," Holden said. "I'm rebooting the sensor package." He methodically shut down the sensors and their software, waited 2 minutes, then slowly brought them back online. His hands were shaking. He was nauseated. His body felt like he was operating his flesh from a distance, and he didn't know how much was the juice and how much was shock. The sensors came back up. Like any other ship that flew the space lanes, the night was hardened against radiation. You couldn't get anywhere near Jupiter's massive radiation belt unless you were. But Holden doubted the ship's designers had half a dozen nuclear weapons going off nearby in mind when they'd created the specs. They'd gotten lucky. Vacuum might protect them from an electromagnetic pulse, but the blast radiation could still have fried every sensor the ship had. Once the array came back up, he scanned the space where the Canterbury had been. There was nothing larger than a softball. He switched over to the ship that killed it, which was flying off sunward at a leisurely 1G. Heat bloomed in Holden's chest. He wasn't scared. Aneurysm-inducing rage made his temples pound and his fists squeeze until his tendons hurt. He flipped on the comms and aimed a tight beam at the retreating ship. "This message is to whoever ordered the destruction of the Canterbury, the civilian ice freighter that you just blew into gas. You don't get to just fly away, you murderous son of a bitch. I don't care what your reasons are, but you just killed 50 friends of mine. You need to know who they were. I am sending to you the name and photograph of everyone who just died in that ship. Take a good look at what you did. Think about that while I work on finding out who you are." He closed the voice channel. pulled up the Canterbury's personnel files and began transmitting the crew dossiers to the other ship. "What are you doing?" asked Naomi from behind him, not from his helmet speakers. She was standing there with her helmet off. Sweat plastered her thick black hair to her head and neck. Her face was unreadable. Holden took off his helmet. "I'm showing them the Canterbury was a real place where real people lived. People with names and families," he said, the juice making his voice less steady than he would have liked. "If there's something resembling a human being giving the orders on that ship, I hope it haunts him right up to the day they put him in the recycler for murder." "I don't think they appreciate it," Naomi said, pointing at the panel behind him. The enemy ship was now painting them with its targeting laser. Holden held his breath. No torpedoes launched, and after a few seconds, the stealth ship turned off its laser, and the engine flared as it scooted off at high G. He heard Naomi let out a shuddering breath. "So, the Canterbury's gone?" Naomi asked. Holden nodded. "Fuck me sideways," said Amos. Amos and Shed stood together at the crew ladder. Amos's face was mottled red and white, and his big hands clenched and unclenched. Shed collapsed to his knees, slamming against the deck and the heavy 2G thrust. He didn't cry. He just looked at Holden and said, "Cameron's never going to get that arm, I guess," then buried his head in his hands and shook. "Slow down, Alex. No need to run now," Holden said into the comm. The ship slowly dropped to 1G. "What now, Captain?" Naomi said, looking at him hard. "You're in charge now. Act like it." "Blowing them out of the sky would be my first choice, but since we don't have the weapons, follow them. Keep our eyes on them until we know where they're going. Expose them to everyone," Holden replied. "Fucking A," said Amos loudly. "Amos," Naomi said over her shoulder, "take Shed below and get him into a couch. If you need to, give him something to put him to sleep." "You got it, boss." Amos put a thick arm around Shed's waist and took him below. When he was gone, Naomi turned back to Holden. "No, sir, we are not chasing that ship. We're going to call for help and then go wherever the help tells us to go." Holden started. "Yes, you're in charge. That makes me XO, and it's the XO's job to tell the captain when he's being an idiot. You're being an idiot, sir. You already tried to goad them into killing us with that broadcast, now you want to chase them? And what will you do if they let you catch them? Broadcast another emotional plea?" Naomi said, moving closer to him. "You are going to get the remaining 4 members of your crew to safety, and that's all. When we're safe, you can go on your crusade, sir." Holden unbuckled the straps on his couch and stood up. The juice was starting to burn out, leaving his body spent and sickened. Naomi lifted her chin and didn't back up. "Glad you're with me, Naomi," he said. "Go see to the crew. McDowell gave me one last order." Naomi looked him over critically. He could see her distrust. He didn't defend himself. He just waited until she was done. She nodded at him once and climbed down the ladder to the deck below. Once she was gone, he worked methodically, putting together a broadcast package that included all the sensor data from the Canterbury and the night. Alex climbed down from the cockpit and sat down heavily in the next chair. "You know, Captain, I've been thinking," he said. His voice had the same post-juice shakes as Holden's own. Holden bit back his irritation at the interruption and said, "What about?" "That stealth ship." Holden turned away from his work. "Tell me." "So I don't know any pirates that have shit like that." "Go on." "In fact, the only time I've seen tech like that was back when I was in the Navy," Alex said. "We were working on ships with energy-absorbing skins and internal heat sinks. More of a strategic weapon than a tactical one. You can't hide an active drive, but if you can get into position and shut the drive down, store all your waste heat internally, you can hide yourself pretty good." Add in the energy-absorbing skin, and radar, LADAR, and passive sensors don't pick you up. Plus, pretty tough to get nuclear torpedoes outside of the military. You're saying the Martian Navy did this? Alex took a long, shuddering breath. If we had it, you know the Earthers were working on it too, he said. They looked at each other across the narrow space, the implications heavier than a 10G burn. Holden pulled the transmitter and battery they'd recovered from the scapulae out of the thigh pocket of his suit. He started pulling it apart, looking for a stamp or an insignia. Alex watched, quiet for once. The transmitter was generic. It could have come from the radio room of any ship in the solar system. The battery was a nondescript gray block. Alex reached out, and Holden handed it to him. Alex pried off the gray plastic cover and flipped the metal battery around in his hands. Without saying a word, he held the bottom up to Holden's face. Stamped in the black metal on the bottom of the battery was a serial number that began with the letters MCRN, Martian Congressional Republic Navy. The radio was set to broadcast on full power. The data package was ready to transmit. Holden stood in front of the camera, leaning a little forward. "My name is James Holden," he said, "and my ship, the Canterbury, was just destroyed by a warship with stealth technology and what appeared to be parts stamped with Martian Navy serial numbers. Data stream to follow." Chapter 6. Miller. The cart sped through the tunnel, siren masking the whine of motors. Behind them they left curious civilians and the scent of overheated bearings. Miller leaned forward in his seat, willing the cart to go faster. They were 3 levels and maybe 4 kilometers from the station house. "Okay," Havelock said. "I'm sorry, but I'm missing something here." "What?" Miller said. He meant, "What are you yammering about?" Havelock took it as, "What are you missing?" "A water hauler millions of clicks from here got vaporized. Why are we going to full alert? Our cisterns will last months without even going on rationing. There are a lot of other haulers out there. Why is this a crisis?" Miller turned and looked at his partner straight on. The small, stocky build. The thick bones from a childhood in full G. Just like the asshole in the transmission. They didn't understand. If Havelock had been in this James Holden's place, he might have done the same stupid, irresponsible, idiotic bullshit. For the space of a breath, they weren't security anymore. They weren't partners. They were a belter and an earther. Miller looked away before Havelock could see the change in his eyes. "That prick Holden? The one in the broadcast?" Miller said. "He just declared war on Mars for us." The cart swerved and bobbed, its internal computer adjusting for some virtual hiccup in the traffic flow half a kilometer ahead. Havelock shifted, grabbing for the support strut. They hit a ramp up to the next level, civilians on foot making a path for them. "You grew up where the waters may be dirty, but it falls out of the sky for you," Miller said. "The air's filthy, but it's not going away if your door seals fail. It's not like that out here." "But we're not on the hauler. We don't need the ice. We aren't under threat," Havelock said. Miller sighed, rubbing his eyes with thumb and knuckle until ghosts of false color bloomed. "When I was homicide," Miller said, "there was this guy, property management specialist working a contract out of Luna. Someone burned half his skin off and dropped him out an airlock. Turned out he was responsible for maintenance on 60 holes up on level 30. Lousy neighborhood. He'd been cutting corners. Hadn't replaced the air filters in 3 months. There was mold growing in 3 of the units. And you know what we found after that?" "What?" Havelock asked. "Not a goddamn thing. Because we stopped looking. Some people need to die, and he was one. And the next guy that took the job cleaned the ducting and swapped the filters on schedule. That's what it's like in the belt. Anyone who came out here and didn't put environmental systems above everything else died young. All us still out here are the ones that cared. Selective effect? Havelock said. You're seriously arguing in favor of selective effect? I never thought I'd hear that shit coming out of you. What's that? Racist propaganda bullshit, Havelock said. It's the one that says the difference in environment has changed the Belters so much that instead of just being a bunch of skinny, obsessive compulsives, they aren't really human anymore. I'm not saying that, Miller said, suspecting that it was exactly what he was saying. It's just that Belters don't take the long view when you screw with basic resources. That water was future air, propellant mass, and potables for us. We have no sense of humor about that shit. The cart hit a ramp of metalwork grate. The lower level fell away below them. Havelock was silent. This Holden guy didn't say it was Mars, just that they found a Martian battery. You think people are going to declare war? Havelock said. Just on the basis of this one guy's pictures of a battery? The ones that wait to get the whole story aren't our problem. At least not tonight, he thought. Once the whole story gets out, we'll see where we stand. The station house was somewhere between 1/2 and 3/4 full. Security men stood in clumps, nodding to each other, eyes narrow and jaws tight. One of the vice cops laughed at something, his amusement loud, forced, smelling of fear. Miller saw the change in Havelock as they walked across the common area to their desks. Havelock had been able to put Miller's reaction down to one man's being oversensitive. A whole room, though. A whole station house. By the time they reached their chairs, Havelock's eyes were wide. Captain Shadid came in. The bleary look was gone. Her hair was pulled back, her uniform crisp and professional. Her voice as calm as a surgeon in a battlefield hospital. She stepped up on the first desk she came to, improvising a pulpit. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "you've seen the transmission. Any questions?" "Who let that fucking earther near a radio?" someone shouted. Miller saw Havelock laugh along with the crowd, but it didn't reach his eyes. Shadid scowled, and the crowd quieted. "Here's the situation," she said. "No way we can control this information. It was broadcast everywhere. We have 5 sites on the internal network that have been mirroring it, and we have to assume it's public knowledge starting 10 minutes ago. Our job now is to keep the rioting to a minimum and ensure station integrity around the port. Station houses 50 and 213 are helping on it too. The Port Authority has released all the ships with interplanet registry. That doesn't mean they're all gone. They still have to round up their crews, but it does mean they're going." "The government offices?" Miller said, loud enough to carry. "Not our problem, thank God," Shadid said. "They have infrastructure in place. Blast doors are already down and sealed. They've broken off from the main environmental systems, so we aren't even breathing their air right now." "Well, that's a relief," Yevgeny said from the cluster of homicide detectives. "Now, the bad news," Shadid said. Miller heard the silence of 150 cops holding their breath. "We've got 80 known OPA agents on the station. They're all employed and legal. And you know this is the kind of thing they've been waiting for. We have an order from the governor that we're not going to do any proactive detention. No one gets arrested until they do something." Angry voices rose in chorus. "Who does he think he is?" someone called from the back. Shadid snapped at the comment like a shark. "The governor is the one who contracted with us to keep this station in working order," Shadid said. "We'll follow his directives." In his peripheral vision, Miller saw Havelock nod. He wondered what the governor thought of the question of Belter independence. Maybe the OPA weren't the only ones who'd been waiting for something like this to happen. Shadid went on, outlining the security response they were permitted. Miller listened with half an ear, so lost in speculating on the politics behind the situation he almost missed it when Shadid called his name. Miller will take the second team to the port level and cover sectors 13 through 24. Kasagawa, Team 3, 25 through 36, and so on. That's 20 men apiece, except for Miller. I can make it with 19, Miller said, then quietly to Havelock. You're sitting this one out, partner. Having an earther with a gun out there isn't going to make things better. Yeah, Havelock said. Saw that coming. Okay, Shadid said. You all know the drill, let's move. Miller rounded up his riot squad. All the faces were familiar, all men and women he'd worked with over his years in security. He organized them in his mind with a nearly automatic efficiency. Brown and Gelbfish both had SWAT experience, so they would lead the wings if it came to crowd control. Aberforth had 3 write-ups for excessive violence since her kid had been busted for drug running on Ganymede, so she was second string. She could work out her anger management issues another time. Around the station house, he heard the other squad commanders making similar decisions. Okay, Miller said. Let's suit up. They moved away in a group, heading for the equipment bay. Miller paused. Havelock remained leaning against his desk, arms folded, eyes locked on the middle distance. Miller was torn between sympathy for the man and impatience. It was hard being on the team, but not on the team. On the other hand, what the hell had he expected? Taking a contract in the belt. Havelock looked up, meeting Miller's gaze. They nodded to each other. Miller was the first to turn away. The equipment bay was part warehouse, part bank vault, designed by someone more concerned with conserving space than getting things out efficiently. The lights, recessed white LEDs, gave the gray walls a sterile cast. Bare stone echoed every voice and footfall. Banks of ammunition and firearms, evidence bags and test panels, spare servers and replacement uniforms lined the walls and filled most of the interior space. The riot gear was in a side room, in gray steel lockers with high-security electronic locks. The standard outfit consisted of high-impact plastic shields, electric batons, shin guards, bullet-resistant chest and thigh armor, and helmets with reinforced face guards. All of it designed to make a handful of station security into an intimidating, inhuman force. Miller keyed in his access code. The seals released. The lockers opened. Well, Miller said conversationally, fuck me. The lockers were empty. Gray coffins with the corpses all gone. Across the room he heard one of the other squad shouting in outrage. Miller systematically opened every riot control locker he could get to. All of them were the same. Shadid appeared at his side, her face pale with rage. "What's Plan B?" Miller asked. Shadid spat on the floor, then closed her eyes. They shifted under her lids like she was dreaming. 2 long breaths later, they opened. "Check the SWAT lockers. There should be enough in there to outfit 2 people in each squad." "Snipers?" Miller said. "You have a better idea, detective?" Shadid said, leaning on the last word. Miller raised his hands in surrender. Riot gear was meant to intimidate and control. SWAT gear was made to kill with the greatest efficiency possible. Seemed their mandate had just changed. On any given day, 1,000 ships might be docked on Ceres Station, and activity there rarely slowed and never stopped. Each sector could accommodate 20 ships, the traffic of humanity and cargo, transport vans, mesocranes, and industrial forklifts, and his squad was responsible for 20 sectors. The air stank of refrigerant and oil. The gravity was slightly above 0.3 G, station spin alone lending the place a sense of oppression and danger. Miller didn't like the port. Having vacuum so close under his feet made him nervous. Passing the dock workers and transport crews, he didn't know whether to scowl or smile. He was here to scare people into behaving, and also to reassure them that everything was under control. After the first 3 sectors, he settled on the smile. It was the kind of lie he was better at. They had just reached the junction of sectors 19 and 20 when they heard screaming. Miller pulled his hand terminal out of his pocket, connected to the central surveillance network, and called up the security camera array. It took a few seconds to find it. A mob of 50 or 60 civilians stretching almost all the way across the tunnel, traffic blocked on both sides. There were weapons being waved over heads, knives, clubs, at least 2 pistols, fists pumped in the air. And at the center of the crowd, a huge shirtless man was beating someone to death. "Showtime," Miller said, waving his squad forward at a run. He was still 100 meters from the turn that would take them to the clot of human violence when he saw the shirtless man knock his victim to the ground, then stomp on her neck. The head twisted sideways at an angle that didn't leave any question. Miller slowed his team to a brisk walk. Arresting the murderer while surrounded by a crowd of his friends would be tough enough without being winded. There was blood in the water now. Miller could sense it. The mob was going to turn out. To the station. To the ships. If the people started joining the chaos, what path would it be likely to take? There was a brothel 1 level up from there and half a kilometer anti-spinward that catered to inner-planet types. The tariff inspector for Sector 21 was married to a girl from Luna and had bragged about it maybe once too often. There were too many targets, Miller thought, even as he motioned his snipers to spread out. He was trying to reason with a fire. Stop it here, and no one else got killed. In his imagination, Candace crossed her arms and said, "What's Plan B?" The outer edge of the mob raised the alarm well before Miller reached it. The surge of bodies and threat shifted. Miller tipped back his hat. Men, women, dark skin, pale, golden brown, and all with the long, thin build of belters, all with the square-mouthed, angry gape of chimpanzees at war. "Let me take a couple of them down, sir," Gelbfish said from his terminal. "Put the fear of God into them." "We'll get there," Miller said, smiling at the angry mob. "We'll get there." The face he expected floated to the front. Shirtless. The big man, blood covering his hands and splattered on his cheek. The seed crystal of the riot. "That one?" Gelbfish asked, and Miller knew that a tiny infrared dot was painting Shirtless's forehead, even as he glowered at Miller and the uniforms behind him. "No," Miller said. "That'll only set the rest of them off." "So what do we do?" Brown said. It was a hell of a question. "Sir," Gelbfish said, "the big fucker's got an OPA tattoo on his left shoulder." "Well," Miller said, "if you do have to shoot him, start there." He stepped forward, tying his terminal into the local system, overriding the alert. When he spoke, his voice boomed from the overhead speakers. "This is Detective Miller. Unless you all want to be locked up as accessories to murder, I suggest you disperse now." Muting the microphone in his terminal, he said to Shirtless, "Not you, big fella. Move a muscle and we shoot you." Someone in the crowd threw a wrench, the silver metal arcing low through the air toward Miller's head. He almost stepped out of the way, but the handle caught him across the ear. His head was filled with the deep sound of bells, and the wet of blood tracked down his neck. "Hold fire!" Miller shouted. "Hold your fire!" The crowd laughed, as if he'd been talking to them. Idiots. Shirtless, emboldened, strode forward. The steroids had distended his thighs so badly that he waddled. Miller turned the mic on his terminal back on. If the crowd was watching them face each other down, they weren't breaking things. It wasn't spreading. Not yet. "So, friend, you only kick helpless people to death, or can anybody join in?" Miller asked, his voice conversational but echoing out of the dock speakers like a pronouncement from God. "The fuck you barking, Earth dog?" Shirtless said. "Earth?" Miller said, chuckling. "I look like I grew up in a gravity well to you? I was born on this rock." "Innes kibble, you bitch," Shirtless said. "You the dog." "You think?" "Fucking dway," Shirtless said. "Fucking true." He flexed his pectorals. Miller suppressed the urge to laugh. "So, killing that poor bastard was for the good of the station?" Miller said. "The good of the belt? Don't be a chump, kid. They're playing you. They want you to act like a bunch of stupid riot boys so they have a reason to shut this place down." "Schrauben Sie die Weibchen," Shirtless said in belter-inflected gutter German, leaning forward. "Okay, second time I've been called a bitch," Miller thought. "Kneecap him," Miller said. Shirtless's legs blew out in twin sprays of crimson and he went down howling. Miller walked past his writhing body, stepping toward the mob. "You're taking your orders from this pendejo?" he said. "Listen to me. We all know what's coming. We know dance starting now, like pow, right? They fuck to agua, and we all know the answer. Out an airlock, no?" He could see it in their faces. The sudden fear of the snipers, then the confusion. He pressed on, not giving them time to think. He switched back to the lower-level lingo, the language of education, authority. "You know what Mars wants? They want you doing this. They want this piece of shit here to make sure that everyone looks at Belters and thinks we're a bunch of psychopaths who tear up their own station. They want to tell themselves we're just like them. Well, we aren't. We're Belters, and we take care of our own." He picked a man at the edge of the mob. Not as pumped as Shirtless, but big. He had an OPA split circle on his arm. "You," Miller said. "You want to fight for the belt?" "Dwe," the man said. "I bet you do." "He did too," Miller said, jerking a thumb back at Shirtless. "But now he's a cripple, and he's going down for murder. So we've already lost one, you see? They're turning us against each other. Can't let them do that. Every one of you I have to arrest or cripple or kill, that's one less we have when the day comes. And it's coming. But it's not now, you understand?" The OPA man scowled. The mob drew back from him, making space. Miller could feel it like a current against him. It was shifting. "Day's coming, hombre," the OPA man said. "You know your side?" The tone was a threat, but there was no power behind it. Miller took a slow breath. It was over. "Always the side of the angels," he said. "Why don't you all go back to work? Show's over here, and we've all got plenty that needs doing." Momentum broken, the mob fell apart. First one and two peeling off from the edges, and then the whole knot untying itself at once. 5 minutes after Miller had arrived, the only signs that anything had happened were Shirtless mewling in a pool of his own blood, the wound on Miller's ear, and the body of the woman 50 good citizens had stood by and watched be beaten to death. She was short, and wearing the flight suit of a Martian freight line. "Only one dead. Makes it a good night," Miller thought sourly. He went to the fallen man. The OPA tattoo was smeared red. Miller knelt. "Friend," he said, "you are under arrest for the murder of that lady over there, whoever the hell she is. You are not required to participate in questioning without the presence of an attorney or union representative, and if you so much as look at me wrong, I'll space you. Do we understand each other?" From the look in the man's eyes, Miller knew they did. Chapter 7. Holden. Holden could drink coffee at half a G. Actually sit and hold a mug under his nose and let the aroma drift up. Sip it slowly and not burn his tongue. Drinking coffee was one of the activities that didn't make the transition to microgravity well, but at half a G, it was fine. So he sat and tried very hard to think about coffee and gravity in the silence of the night's tiny galley. Even the normally talkative Alex was quiet. Amos had set his big handgun on the table and was staring at it with frightening concentration. Shed was asleep. Naomi was sitting across the room, drinking tea and keeping one eye on the wall panel next to her. She'd routed Ops to it. As long as he kept his mind on his coffee, he didn't have to think about Ade giving one last gasp of fear and then turning into a glowing vapor. Alex ruined it by speaking. "At some point, we need to decide where we're going," he said. Holden nodded, took a sip of his coffee, and closed his eyes. His muscles vibrated like plucked strings, and his peripheral vision was dappled with points of imaginary light. The first twinges of the post-juice crash were starting, and it was going to be a bad one. He wanted to enjoy these last few moments before the pain hit. "He's right, Jim," Naomi said. "We can't just fly in a big circle at half a G forever." Holden didn't open his eyes. The darkness behind his lids was bright and active and mildly nauseating. "We aren't waiting forever," he said. "We're waiting 50 minutes for Saturn Station to call me back and tell me what to do with their ship. The night is still P&K property. We're still employees. You wanted me to call for help, I called for help. Now we are waiting to see what that looks like." "Shouldn't we start flying toward Saturn Station then, boss?" Amos asked, directing his question at Naomi. Alex snorted. "Not on the Knight's engine. Even if we had the fuel for that trip, which we don't, I don't want to sit in this can for the next 3 months," he said. "No, if we're going somewhere, it's got to be the Belt or Jupiter. Or as close to exactly between them as you can get." "I vote we continue on to Ceres," Naomi said. "P&K has offices there. We don't know anyone in the Jupiter complex." Without opening his eyes, Holden shook his head. "No. We wait for them to call us back." Naomi made an exasperated sound. It was funny, he thought, how you could make someone's voice out from the smallest sounds, a cough or a sigh, or the little gasp right before she died. Holden sat up and opened his eyes. He placed his coffee mug on the table carefully, with hands that were starting to palsy. "I don't want to fly sunward to Ceres because that's the direction the torpedo ship went. And your point about chasing them is well taken, Naomi. I don't want to fly out to Jupiter because we only have the fuel for one trip, and once we fly that direction for a while, we're locked in. We are sitting here and drinking coffee because I need to make a decision, and P&K gets a say in that decision. So we wait for them to answer, and then I decide." Holden got up slowly, carefully, and began moving toward the crew ladder. "I'm going to crash for a few minutes. Let the worst of the shakes wear off. If P&K calls, let me know." Holden popped sedative tabs, thin, bitter pills with an aftertaste like bread mold, but he didn't sleep. Over and over, McDowell placed a hand on his arm and called him Jim. Becca laughed and cursed like a sailor. Cameron bragged about his prowess on the ice. Ade gasped. Holden had flown the Ceres to Saturn circuit on the Canterbury 9 times, 2 round trips a year for almost 5 years. Most of the crew had been there the entire time. Flying on the Cant might be the bottom of the barrel, but that meant there was nowhere else to go. People stayed, made the ship their home. After the near-constant duty transfers of the Navy, he appreciated stability, made it his home too. McDowell said something he couldn't quite make out. The Cant groaned like she was under a hard burn. Ade smiled and winked at him. The worst leg cramp in history hit every muscle in his body at once. Holden bit down hard on his rubber mouthguard, screaming. The pain brought an oblivion that was almost a relief. His mind shut off, drowned out by the needs of his body. Fortunately or not, the drugs started to kick in. His muscles unknotted. His nerves stopped screaming, and consciousness returned like a reluctant schoolboy. His jaw ached as he pulled out the guard. He'd worn tooth marks in the rubber. In the dim blue cabin light, he thought about the kind of man who followed an order to kill a civilian ship. He'd done some things in the Navy that had kept him awake nights. He'd followed some orders he vehemently disagreed with. But to lock on to a civilian ship with 50 people aboard and press the button that launched 6 nuclear weapons? He would have refused. If his commanding officer had insisted, he'd have declared it an illegal order and demanded that the executive officer take control of the ship and arrest the captain. They'd have had to shoot him to get him away from the weapon post. He'd known the sort of people who would have followed the order, though. He told himself that they were sociopaths and animals, no better than pirates who'd board your ship, strip your engine, and take your air. That they weren't human. But even as he nursed his hatred, drug-hazed rage offering its nihilistic comforts, he couldn't believe they were idiots. The itch at the back of his head was still, why? What does anyone gain from killing an ice hauler? Who gets paid? Someone always gets paid. I'm going to find you. I'm going to find you and end you. But before I do, I'm going to make you explain. The second wave of pharmaceuticals exploded in his bloodstream. He was hot and limp, his veins filled with syrup. Just before the tabs finally knocked him out, Ade smiled and winked and blew away like dust. The comm beeped at him. Naomi's voice said, "Jim, the P&K response finally came in. Want me to send it down there?" Holden struggled to make sense of the words, blinked. Something was wrong with his bunk, with the ship. Slowly, he remembered. "Jim?" "No," he said. "I want to watch it up in ops with you. How long was I out?" 3 hours, she said. Jesus, they took their sweet time getting back to us, didn't they? Holden rolled out of his couch and wiped off the crust that held his eyelashes together. He'd been weeping in his sleep. He told himself it was from the juice crash. The deep ache in his chest was only stressed cartilage. What were you doing for 3 hours before you called us back? He wondered. Naomi waited for him at the comm station, a man's face frozen mid-word on the screen in front of her. He seemed familiar. "That isn't the operations manager." "Nope, it's the P&K legal counsel on Saturn Station. The one who gave that speech after the crackdown on supply pilfering," Naomi said. "Stealing from us is stealing from you. That one." "Lawyer," Holden said with a grimace. "This is going to be bad news, then." Naomi restarted the message. The lawyer sprang into motion. "James Holden, this is Wallace Fitz calling from Saturn Station. We've received your request for help and your report of the incident. We've also received your broadcast accusing Mars of destroying the Canterbury. This was, to say the least, ill-advised. The Martian representative on Saturn Station was in my office not 5 minutes after your broadcast was received, and the MCR is quite upset by what they view as unfounded accusations of piracy by their government. To further investigate this matter and to aid in discovering the true wrongdoers, if any, the MCRN is dispatching one of their ships from the Jupiter system to pick you up. The MCRN Donager is the name of this vessel. Your orders from P&K are as follows. You will fly at best possible speed to the Jupiter system. You will cooperate fully with instructions given you by the MCRN Donager, or by any officer of the Martian Congressional Republic Navy. You will assist the MCRN in their investigation into the destruction of the Canterbury. You will refrain from any further broadcasting except to us or the Donager. If you fail to follow these instructions from the company and from the government of Mars, your contract with P&K will be terminated, and you will be considered in illegal possession of a P&K shuttlecraft. We will then prosecute you to the fullest extent of the law. Wallace Fitz, out." Holden frowned at the monitor, then shook his head. "I never said Mars did it." You sort of did, Naomi replied. I didn't say anything that wasn't entirely factual and backed up by the data I transmitted, and I engaged in no speculation about those facts. So, Naomi said, what do we do? No fucking way, Amos said. No fucking way. The galley was a small space. The five of them filled it uncomfortably. The gray laminate walls showed whirls of bright scrapes where mold had grown once and been cleaned off with microwaves and steel wool. Shed sat with his back against the wall, Naomi across the table. Alex stood in the doorway. Amos started pacing along the back. 2 fast paces, then a turn, before the lawyer had finished his first sentence. I'm not happy about it either, but that's the word from the Home Office, Holden said, pointing at the galley's display screen. Didn't mean to get you guys in trouble. No problem, Holden. I still think you did the right thing, Shed replied, running one hand through his limp blonde hair. So, what do you think the Martians will do with us? I'm thinking pull our fucking toes off until Holden goes back on the radio and says it wasn't them, Amos said. What in the holy hell is this? They attacked us and now we're supposed to cooperate? They killed the captain. Amos, Holden said. Sorry, Holden. Captain, Amos said. But Jesus wept. We're getting fucked here and not the nice way. We're not going to do this, are we? I don't want to disappear into some Martian prison ship forever, Holden said. The way I see it, we have 2 options. Either we go along with this, which is basically throwing ourselves on their mercy, or we run, try to make it to the belt and hide. I'm voting for the belt, Naomi said, her arms crossed. Amos raised a hand, seconding the motion. Shed slowly raised his own. Alex shook his head. I know the Doniger, he said. She's not some rockhopper. She's the flagship for the MCRN's Jupiter fleet. Battleship. 250,000 tons of bad news. You ever serve on a ship that size? No, I wasn't on anything bigger than a destroyer, Holden replied. I served on the Bandon with the home fleet. We can't go anywhere that a ship like that can't find us. She's got 4 main engines, each one bigger than our whole ship. She's designed for long periods at high G with every sailor on board juiced to the gills. We can't run, sir. And even if we did, her sensor package could track a golf ball and hit it with a torpedo from half the solar system away. Oh, fuck that, sir, Amos said, standing up. These Martian needle dicks blew up the Cant. I say run. At least make it hard for them. Naomi put one hand on Amos's forearm, and the big mechanic paused, shook his head, and sat down. The galley was silent. Holden wondered if McDowell had ever had to make a call like this, and what the old man would have done. Jim, this is your decision, she said, but her eyes were hard. No, what you are going to do is get the remaining 4 members of your crew to safety, and that's all, she thought. Holden nodded, and tapped his fingers against his lips. P&K doesn't have our back on this one. We probably can't get away, but I don't want to disappear either, Holden said. And then, I think we go, but we don't go quietly. Why don't we go disobey the spirit of an order? Naomi finished working on the comm panel, her hair now floating around her like a black cloud in the 0G. Okay, Jim, I'm dumping every watt into the comm array. They'll be getting this loud and clear all the way out to Titania, she said. Holden reached up to run one hand through his sweat-plastered hair. In the null gravity, that just made it stick straight out in every direction. He zipped up his flight suit and pressed the record button. This is James Holden, formerly of the Canterbury, now on the shuttle Knight. We are cooperating with an investigation into who destroyed the Canterbury, and as part of that cooperation are agreeing to be taken aboard your ship, the MCRN Doniger. We hope that this cooperation means that we will not be held prisoner or harmed. Any such action would only serve to reinforce the idea that the Canterbury was destroyed by a Martian vessel. James Holden out. Holden leaned back. Naomi, send that out broadband. That's a dirty trick, boss, said Alex. Pretty hard to disappear us now. I believe in the ideal of the transparent society, Mr. Kamal, said Holden. Alex grinned, pushed off, and floated down the gangway. Naomi tapped the comm panel, making a small, satisfied sound in the back of her throat. Naomi? Holden said. She turned, her hair waving lazily like they were both drowning. If this goes badly, I need you to throw you to the wolves, she said. Blame everything on you and get the others back to Saturn Station safely? Yeah, Holden said. Don't play the hero. She let the words hang in the air until the last of the irony leached out of them. Hadn't crossed my mind, sir, she said. Knight, this is Captain Teresa Yao of the MCRN Doniger, said the severe-looking woman on the comm screen. Message received. Please refrain from further general broadcasts. My navigator will be sending course information shortly. Follow that course exactly. Yao out. Alex laughed. I think you pissed her off, he said. Got the course info. They'll be picking us up in 13 days. Give her time to really stew on it. 13 days before I'm clapped in irons and have needles shoved under my fingernails. Holden sighed, leaning back in his couch. Well, best begin our flight toward imprisonment and torture. You may lock in the transmitted course, Mr. Kamal. Roger that, Cap. Huh, said Alex. A problem? Well, the Knight just did her pre-burn sweep for collision objects, Alex said. And we have 6 belt objects on an intercept course. Belt objects? Fast contacts with no transponder signal, Alex replied. Ships, but flying dark. They'll catch us just about 2 days before the Doniger does. Holden pulled up the display. 6 small signatures, yellow-orange shifting toward red. Heavy burn. Well, Holden said to the screen. And who the hell are you? Chapter 8. Miller. Aggression against the Belt is what Earth and Mars survive on. Our weakness is their strength, the masked woman said from Miller's terminal screen. The split circle of the OPA draped behind her like something painted on a sheet. Don't be afraid of them. Their only power is your fear. Well, that and 100 or so gunships, Havelock said. From what I hear, Miller said, if you clap your hands and say you believe, they can't shoot you. I have to try that sometime. We must rise up, the woman said, her voice growing shrill. We have to take our destiny before it is taken from us. Remember the Canterbury. Miller shut the viewer down and leaned back in his chair. The station was at its change of shift surge. Voices raised one over the other as the previous round of cops brought the incoming ones up to speed. The smell of fresh coffee competed with cigarette smoke. There's maybe a dozen like her, Havelock said, nodding toward the dead terminal screen. She's my favorite, though. There are times I swear she's actually foaming at the mouth. How many more files? Miller asked, and his partner shrugged. 200, 300. Havelock said, and took a drag on his cigarette. He'd started smoking again. Every few hours there's a new one. They aren't coming from one place. Sometimes they're broadcast on the radio, sometimes the files show up on public partitions. Orlan found some guys at a portside bar passing out these little VR squids like they were pamphlets. She bust them? No, Havelock said, as if it was no big deal. A week had passed since James Holden, self-appointed martyr, had proudly announced that he and his crew were going to talk to someone from the Martian Navy instead of just slinging shit and implications. The footage of the Canterbury's death was everywhere. debates raging over every frame. The log files that documented the incident were perfectly legitimate, or they were obviously doctored. The torpedoes that had slaughtered the hauler were nukes, or standard pirate fare that breached the drive by mistake, or it was all artifice lifted from old stock footage to cover up what had really killed the cant. The riots had lasted for 3 days, on and off, like a fire hot enough to reignite every time the air pumped back in. The administrative offices reopened under heavy security, but they reopened. The ports fell behind, but they were catching up. The shirtless bastard who Miller had ordered shot was in the Star Helix detainment infirmary, getting new knees, filling out protests against Miller and preparing for his murder trial. 600 cubic meters of nitrogen had gone missing from a warehouse in Sector 15. An unlicensed whore had been beaten up and locked in a storage unit. As soon as she was done giving evidence about her attackers, she'd be arrested. They'd caught the kids who'd been breaking the surveillance cameras on Level 16. Superficially, everything was business as usual. Only superficially. When Miller had started working homicide, one of the things that had struck him was the surreal calm of the victims' families. People who had just lost wives, husbands, children, and lovers. People whose lives had just been branded by violence. More often than not, they were calmly offering drinks and answering questions, making the detectives feel welcome. A civilian coming in unaware might have mistaken them for whole. It was only in the careful way they held themselves and the extra quarter second it took their eyes to focus that Miller could see how deep the damage was. Ceres Station was holding itself carefully. Its eyes were taking a quarter second longer to focus. Middle-class people, storekeepers, maintenance workers, computer techs, were avoiding him on the tube the way petty criminals did. Conversations died when Miller came near. In the station, the sense of being under siege was growing. A month earlier, Miller and Havelock, Cobb and Richter and the rest had been the steadying hand of the law. Now, they were employees of an Earth-based security contractor. The difference was subtle, but it was deep. It made him want to stand taller, to show with his body that he was a belter, that he belonged there. It made him want to win people's good opinion back. Let by a bunch of guys passing out virtual reality propaganda with a warning, maybe. It wasn't a smart impulse. "What have we got on the board?" Miller asked. "2 burglaries that look like that same ring," Havelock said. "That domestic dispute from last week still needs the report closed up. There was a pretty good assault over by Nakanish Import Consortium, but Shadid was talking to Dyson and Patel about that, so it's probably spoken for already." "So you want—" Havelock looked up and out to cover the fact that he was looking away. It was something he'd been doing more often since things had gone to shit. "We've really got to get the reports done," Havelock said. "Not just the domestic. There are 4 or 5 folders that are only still open because they need to be crossed and dotted." "Yeah," Miller said. Since the riots, he'd watched everyone in a bar get served before Havelock. He'd seen how the other cops from Shadid down went out of their way to reassure Miller that he was one of the good guys, a tacit apology for saddling him with an earther. And he'd seen Havelock see it too. It made Miller want to protect the man, to let Havelock spend his days in the safety of paperwork and station house coffee. Help the man pretend that he wasn't hated for the gravity he'd grown up in. That wasn't a smart impulse either. "What about your bullshit case?" Havelock asked. "What?" Havelock held up a folder. The Julie Mao case. The kidnap job. The sideshow. Miller nodded and rubbed his eyes. Someone at the front of the station house yelped. Someone else laughed. "Yeah, no," Miller said. "Haven't touched it." Havelock grinned and held it out to him. Miller accepted the file, flipped it open. The 18-year-old grinned out at him with perfect teeth. "I don't want to saddle you with all the desk driving," Miller said. "Hey, you're not the one that kept me off that one. That was Shadid's call. And anyway, it's just paperwork. Never killed anyone. You feel guilty about it? You can buy me a beer after work." Miller tapped the case against the corner of his desk, the small impact settling the contents against the folder's spine. "Right," he said. "I'll go do some follow-up on the bullshit. I'll be back by lunch. Write something up to keep the boss happy." "I'll be here," Havelock said. Then, as Miller rose, "Hey, look, I didn't want to say anything until I was sure, but I also don't want you to hear it someplace else." "Put in for a transfer?" Miller said. "Yeah. Talk to some of those Protogen contractors that passed through. They say their Ganymede office is looking for a new lead investigator, and I thought—" Havelock shrugged. "It's a good move," Miller said. "Just want to go someplace with a sky, even if you look at it through domes," Havelock said, and all the bluff masculinity of police work couldn't keep the wistfulness out of his voice. "It's a good move," Miller said again. Juliet Andromeda Mau's hole was in the 9th level of a 14-tiered tunnel near the port. The great inverted V was almost half a kilometer wide at the top and no more than a standard tube width at the bottom, the retrofit of one of a dozen reaction mass chambers from the years before the asteroid had been given its false gravity. Now, thousands of cheap holes burrowed into the walls, hundreds on each level, heading straight back like shotgun shacks. Kids played on the terraced streets, shrieking and laughing at nothing. Someone at the bottom was flying a kite in the constant gentle spin breeze, the bright mylar diamond swerving and bucking in the microturbulence. Miller checked his terminal against the numbers painted on the wall. 5151-I. Home sweet home to the poor little rich girl. He keyed his override, and the dirty green door popped its seals and let him pass. The hole canted up into the body of the station. 3 small rooms, general living space at the front, then a bedroom hardly larger than the cot it contained, then a stall with shower, toilet, and half-sink, all within elbow distance. It was a standard design. He'd seen it 1,000 times. Miller stood for a minute, not looking at anything in particular, listening to the reassuring hiss of air cycling through the ductwork. He reserved judgment, waiting as the back of his head built an impression of the place and, through it, of the girl who'd lived there. Spartan was the wrong word. The place was simple, yes. The only decorations were a small framed watercolor of a slightly abstracted woman's face over the table in the front room, and a cluster of playing card-sized plaques over the cot in the bedroom. He leaned close to read the small script. A formal award granting Julie Mao, not Juliet, purple belt status by the Series Center for Jiu-Jitsu. Another stepping her up to brown belt. They were 2 years apart. Tough school, then. He put his fingers on the empty space on the wall where one for black could go. There was none of the affectation. No stylized throwing stars or imitation swords. Just a small acknowledgement that Julie Mao had done what she had done. He gave her points for that. The drawers had 2 changes of clothes, one of heavy canvas and denim and one of blue linen with a silk scarf. One for work, one for play. It was less than Miller owned, and he was hardly a clothes horse. With her socks and underwear was a wide armband with a split circle of the OPA. Not a surprise for a girl who'd turned her back on wealth and privilege to live in a dump like this. The refrigerator had 2 takeaway boxes filled with spoiled food and a bottle of local beer. Miller hesitated, then took the beer. He sat at the table and pulled up the hole's built-in terminal. True to Shadid's word, Julie's partition opened to Miller's password. The custom background was a racing pinnace. The interface was customized in small, legible iconography. Communication, entertainment, work, personal. Elegant. That was the word. Not Spartan, but elegant. He paged quickly through her professional files, letting his mind take in an overview, just as he had with the whole living space. There would be time for rigor, and a first impression was usually more useful than an encyclopedia. She had training videos on several different light transport craft. Some political archives, but nothing that raised a flag. A scanned volume of poetry by some of the first settlers in the belt. He shifted to her personal correspondence. It was all kept as neat and controlled as a belter's. All incoming messages were filtered to subfolders. Work, personal, broadcast, shopping. He popped open broadcast. 200 or 300 political news feeds, discussion group digests, bulletins and announcements. A few had been viewed here and there, but nothing with any sort of religious observation. Julie was the kind of woman who would sacrifice for a cause, but not the kind who'd take joy in reading the propaganda. Miller filed that away. Shopping was a long tracking of simple merchant messages. Some receipts, some announcements, some requests for goods and services. A cancellation for a belt-based singles circle caught his eye. Miller resorted for related correspondence. Julie had signed up for the low-G, low-pressure dating service in February of the previous year and cancelled in June without having used it. The personal folder was more diverse. At a rough guess, there were 60 or 70 subfolders broken down by name. Some were people. Sasha Lloyd Navarro, Aaron Michaels. Others were private notations. Sparring Circle, OPA. Bullshit guilt trips. Well, this could be interesting, he said to the empty hole. 50 messages, dating back 5 years, all marked as originating at the Mao-Kwiatkowski mercantile stations, in the Belt and on Luna. Unlike the political tracts, all but one had been opened. Miller took a pull from the beer and considered the most recent 2 messages. The most recent, still unread, was from JPM. Jules Pierre Mao, at a guess. The one immediately before it showed 3 drafted replies, none of them sent. It was from Ariadne, the mother. There was always an element of voyeurism in being a detective. It was legal for him to be here, poking through the private life of a woman he'd never met. It was part of his legitimate investigation to know that she was lonely, that the only toiletries in her bathroom were her own, that she was proud. No one would have any complaints to make, or at least any that carried repercussions for his job, if he read every private message on her partition. Drinking her beer was the most ethically suspect thing he'd done since he'd come in. And still, he hesitated for a few seconds before opening the second-to-last message. The screen shifted. On better equipment, it would have been indistinguishable from ink on paper, but Julie's cheap system shuddered at the thinnest lines and leaked a soft glow at the left edge. The handwriting was delicate and legible, either done with a calligraphic software good enough to vary letter shape and line width, or else handwritten. Sweetheart, I hope everything's going well for you. I wish you would write to me on your own sometimes. I feel like I have to put in a request in triplicate just to hear how my own daughter is doing. I know this adventure of yours is all about freedom and self-reliance, but surely there's still room in there to be considerate. I wanted to get in touch with you especially because your father is going through one of his consolidation phases again, and we're thinking of selling the Razorback. I know it was important to you once, but I suppose we've all given up on your racing again. It's just racking up storage fees now, and there's no call to be sentimental. It was signed with the flowing initials, A.M. Miller considered the words. Somehow he'd expected the paternal exhortations of the very rich to be more subtle. If you don't do as we say, we'll get rid of your toys. If you don't write, if you don't come home, if you don't love us. Miller opened the first incomplete draft. Mother, if that's what you call yourself, thank you so much for dropping yet another turd onto my day. I can't believe how selfish and petty and crude you are. I can't believe you sleep at night, or that you ever thought I could— Miller skimmed the rest. The tone seemed consistent. The second draft reply was dated 2 days later. He skipped to it. Mom, I'm sorry we've been so estranged these last few years. I know it's been hard for you and for Daddy. I hope you can see that the decisions I've made were never meant to hurt either of you. About the Razorback, I wish you'd reconsider. She's my first boat, and It stopped there. Miller leaned back. Steady on, kid, he said to the imaginary Julie, then opened the last draft. Ariadne, do what you have to do. Julie. Miller laughed and raised his bottle to the screen in toast. They'd known how to hit her where it hurt, and Julie had taken the blow. If he ever caught her and shipped her back, it was going to be a bad day for both of them. All of them. He finished the beer, dropped the bottle into the recycling chute, and opened the last message. He more than half dreaded learning the final fate of the Razorback, but it was his job to know as much as he could. Julie, this is not a joke. This is not one of your mother's drama fits. I have solid information that the Belt is about to be a very unsafe place. Whatever differences we have, we can work out later. For your own safety, come home now. Miller frowned. The air recycler hummed. Outside, the local kids whistled high and loud. He tapped the screen, closing the last bullshit guilt trip message, then opened it again. It had been sent from Luna, 2 weeks before James Holden and the Canterbury raised the specter of war between Mars and the Belt. This sideshow was getting interesting. Chapter 9. Holden. The ships are still not responding, Naomi said, punching a key sequence on the comm panel. I didn't think they would, but I want to show the Donager that we're worried about being followed. It's all covering our asses at this point, Holden said. Naomi's spine popped as she stretched. Holden pulled a protein bar out of the box in his lap and threw it at her. Eat. She peeled the wrapping off while Amos clambered up the ladder and threw himself into the couch next to her. His coverall was so filthy it shined. Just as with the others, 3 days on the cramped shuttle hadn't helped his personal hygiene. Holden reached up and scratched his own greasy hair with distaste. The night was too small for showers, and the zero-G sinks were too small to stick your head in. Amos had solved the hair-washing problem by shaving all of his off. Now he just had a ring of stubble around his bald spot. Somehow, Naomi's hair stayed shiny and mostly oil-free. Holden wondered how she did that. "Toss me some chow, XO," Amos said. "Captain," Naomi corrected. Holden threw a protein bar at him, too. Amos snatched it from the air, then considered the long, thin package with distaste. "God damn, boss, I get my left nut for food that didn't look like a dildo," Amos said, then tapped his food against Naomi's in mock toast. "Tell me about our water," Holden said. "Well, I've been crawling around between hulls all day. I've tightened everything that can be tightened and slapped epoxy on anything that can't, so we aren't dripping anywhere." "It'll still be right down to the wire, Jim," Naomi said. "The night's recycling systems are crap. She was never intended to process 5 people's worth of waste back into potables for 2 weeks. Down to the wire I can handle. We'll just learn to live with each other's stink. I was worried about nowhere near enough. Speaking of which, I'm going to head up to my rack and spray in some more deodorant," Amos said. "After all day crawling in the ship's guts, my stink's even keeping me awake tonight." Amos swallowed the last of his food and smacked his lips with mock relish, then climbed out of his couch and headed down the crew ladder. Holden took a bite of his own bar. It tasted like greased cardboard. "What's Shed up to?" he asked. "He's been pretty quiet." Naomi, frowning, put her half-eaten bar down on the comm panel. "I wanted to talk to you about that. He's not doing well, Jim. Out of all of us, he's having the hardest time with what's happened. You and Alex were both Navy men. They train you to deal with losing shipmates. Amos has been flying so long, this is actually the third ship that's gone down under him, if you can believe that. And you are made entirely of cast iron and titanium, Holden said, only pretending to joke. Not entirely. 80–90% tops, Naomi said with a half-smile. Seriously, though, I think you should talk to him. And say what? I'm no psychiatrist. The Navy version of this speech involves duty and honorable sacrifice and avenging fallen comrades. Doesn't work as well when your friends have been murdered for no apparent reason and there's essentially no chance you can do anything about it. I didn't say you had to fix him. I said you needed to talk to him. Holden got up from his couch with a salute. Yes, sir, he said. At the ladder, he paused. Again, thank you, Naomi. And really, I know. Go be the captain, she said, turning back to her panel and calling up the ship op screen. I'll keep waving at the neighbors. Holden found Shed in the Knight's tiny sick bay, really more of a sick closet. Other than a reinforced cot, the cabinets of supplies, and a half-dozen pieces of wall-mounted equipment, there was just enough room for one stool stuck to the floor on magnetic feet. Shed was sitting on it. Hey, buddy, mind if I come in? Holden asked. Did I actually say, hey, buddy? He thought. Shed shrugged and pulled up an inventory screen on the wall panel, opening various drawers and staring at the contents, pretending he'd been in the middle of something. Look, Shed, this thing with the Canterbury has really hit everyone hard, and you've... Holden said. Shed turned, holding up a white squeeze tube. 3% acetic acid solution. Didn't realize we had this out here. The cant's run out, and I've got 3 people with GW who could really use it. Why'd they put it on the Knight, I wonder? Shed said. GW? Was all Holden could think to reply. Genital warts. Acetic acid solution is the treatment for any visible warts. Burns them off. Hurts like hell, but it does the job. No reason to keep it on the shuttle. Medical inventory is always so messed up. Holden opened his mouth to speak, found nothing to say, and closed it again. We've got acetic acid cream, Shed said, his voice increasingly shrill, but no Elimset for pain. Which do you think you'd need more on a rescue shuttle? If we'd found anyone on that wreck with a bad case of GW, we'd have been set. A broken bone, you're out of luck. Just suck it up. Look, Shed, Holden said, trying to break in. Oh, and look at this. No coagulant booster. What the hell? Hey, no chance anyone on a rescue mission could, start bleeding. Catch a case of red bumps on your crank, sure, but bleeding? No way. I mean, we've got 4 cases of syphilis on the cant right now, one of the oldest diseases in the book, and we still can't get rid of it. I tell those guys, the hookers on Saturn Station are banging every ice bucker on the circuit, so put the glove on. But do they listen? No. So here we are with syphilis and not enough ciprofloxacin. Holden felt his jaw slide forward. He gripped the side of the hatch and leaned into the room. Everyone on the cant is dead, Holden said, making each word clear and strong and brutal. Everyone is dead. No one needs the antibiotics. No one needs wart cream. Shed stopped talking, and all the air went out of him like he'd been gut-punched. He closed the drawers in the supply cabinet and turned off the inventory screen with small, precise movements. I know, he said in a quiet voice. I'm not stupid. I just need some time. We all do. But we're stuck in this tiny can together. I'll be honest, I came down here because Naomi is worried about you. But now that I'm here, you're freaking me the hell out. It's okay because I'm the captain now and it's my job, but I can't have you freaking Alex or Amos out. We're 10 days from being grabbed by a Martian battleship, and that's scary enough without the doctor falling apart. I'm not a doctor. I'm just a tech, Shed said, his voice very small. You're our doctor, okay? To the 4 of us here with you on this ship, you're our doctor. If Alex starts having post-traumatic stress episodes and needs meds to keep it together, he'll come to you. If you're down here jabbering about warts, he'll turn around and go back up to the cockpit and just do a really bad job of flying. You want to cry? Do it with all of us. We'll sit together in the galley and get drunk and cry like babies, but we'll do it together where it's safe. No more hiding down here." Shed nodded. "Can we do that?" he said. "Do what?" Holden asked. "Get drunk and cry like babies?" "Hell yes. That is officially on the schedule for tonight. Report to the galley at 2000 hours, Mr. Garvey. Bring a cup." Shed started to reply when the general comm clicked on and Naomi said, "Jim, come back up to ops." Holden gripped Shed's shoulder for a minute, then left. In ops, Naomi had the comm screen up again and was speaking to Alex in low tones. The pilot was shaking his head and frowning. A map glowed on her screen. "What's up?" Holden asked. "We're getting a tight beam, Jim. It locked on and started transmitting just a couple minutes ago," Naomi replied. "From the Doniger?" The Martian battleship was the only thing he could think of that might be inside laser communications range. "No, from the Belt," Naomi said. "And not from Ceres or Eros or Pallas either. None of the big stations." She pointed at a small dot on her display. "It's coming from here." "That's empty space," Holden said. "Nope," Alex checked. "It's the site of a big construction project Tycho is working on. Not a lot of detail on it, but radar returns are pretty strong. Something out there has a comm array that'll put a dot the size of Uranus on us from over 3 AU away," Alex said. "Okay, wow, that's impressive. What is our anus-sized dot saying?" Holden asked. "You'll never believe this," Naomi said and turned on the playback. A dark-skinned man with the heavy facial bones of an earther appeared on the screen. His hair was graying, and his neck was ropey with old muscle. He smiled and said, "Hello, James Holden. My name is Fred Johnson." Holden hit the pause button. "This guy looks familiar. Search the ship's database for that name," he said. Naomi didn't move. She just stared at him with a puzzled look on her face. "What?" he said. "That's Frederick Johnson," she said. "Okay. Colonel Frederick Lucius Johnson." The pause might have been a second. It might have been an hour. "Jesus," was all Holden could think to say. The man on the screen had once been among the most decorated officers in the UN military, and ended up one of its most embarrassing failures. To Belters, he was the earther Sheriff of Nottingham who'd turned into Robin Hood. To Earth, he was the hero who'd fallen from grace. Fred Johnson started his rise to fame with a series of high-profile captures of Belt pirates during one of the periods of tension between Earth and Mars that seemed to ramp up every few decades and then fade away again. Whenever the system's two superpowers rattled their sabers at each other, crime in the Belt rose. Colonel Johnson, Captain Johnson at the time, and his small wing of 3 missile frigates destroyed a dozen pirate ships and 2 major bases in a 2-year span. By the time the coalition had stopped bickering, piracy was actually down in the Belt, and Fred Johnson was the name on everyone's lips. He was promoted and given command over the Coalition Marine Division tasked with policing the Belt, where he continued to serve with distinction. Until Anderson Station. A tiny shipping depot almost on the opposite side of the Belt from the major port Ceres. Most people, including most Belters, would not have been able to find Anderson Station on a map. Its only importance was as a minor distribution station for water and air in one of the sparsest stretches of the Belt. Fewer than 1 million Belters got their air from Anderson. Gustav Marconi, a career coalition bureaucrat on the station, decided to implement a 3% handling surcharge on shipments passing through the station in hopes of raising the bottom line. Less than 5% of the Belters buying their air from Anderson were living bottle to mouth, so just under 50,000 Belters might have to spend 1 day of each month not breathing. Only a small percentage of those 50,000 lacked the leeway in their recycling systems to cover this minor shortfall. Of those, only a small portion felt that armed revolt was the correct course. Which was why, of the 1,000,000 affected, only 170 armed Belters came to the station, took over, and threw Marconi out an airlock. They demanded a government guarantee that no further handling surcharges would be added to the price of air and water coming through the station. The coalition sent Colonel Johnson. During the massacre of Anderson Station, the Belters kept the station cameras rolling, broadcasting to the solar system the entire time. Everyone watched as coalition Marines fought a long, gruesome, corridor-to-corridor battle against men with nothing to lose and no reason to surrender. The coalition won. It was a foregone conclusion, but it took 3 days of broadcast slaughter. The iconic image of the video was not one of the fighting, but the last image the station cameras caught before they were cut off. Colonel Johnson in station ops, surrounded by the corpses of the Belters who'd made their last stand there, surveying the carnage with a flat stare, and hands limp at his sides. The UN tried to keep Colonel Johnson's resignation quiet, but he was too much a public figure. The video of the battle dominated the nets for weeks, only displaced when the former Colonel Johnson made a public statement apologizing for the massacre and announcing that the relationship between the belt and the inner planets was untenable and heading toward ever greater tragedy. Then he vanished. He was almost forgotten, a footnote in the history of human carnage until the Palace Colony revolt 4 years later. This time, refinery metal workers kicked the coalition governor off station. Instead of a tiny way station with 170 rebels, it was a major belt rock with more than 150,000 people on it. When the coalition ordered in the Marines, everyone expected a bloodbath. Colonel Johnson came out of nowhere and talked the metal workers down. He talked the coalition commanders into holding back the Marines until the station could be handed over peacefully. He spent more than a year negotiating with the coalition governor to improve working conditions in the refineries, and suddenly, the butcher of Anderson Station was a Belt hero and an icon. An icon who was beaming private messages to the night. Holden hit the play button, and that, Fred Johnson said, "Mr. Holden, I think you're being played. Let me say straight out that I am speaking to you as an official representative of the Outer Planets Alliance. I don't know what you've heard, but we aren't all a bunch of cowboys itching for a chance to shoot our way to freedom. I've spent the last 10 years working to make life for the Belters better without anyone getting shot. I believe in this idea so deeply that I gave up my Earth citizenship when I came out here. I tell you that so you'll know how invested I am. I may be the one person in the solar system who wants war the least, and my voice is loud in OPA councils. You may have heard some of the broadcasts beating on the war drums and calling for revenge against Mars for what happened to your ship. I've talked to every OPA cell leader I know, and no one's claiming responsibility. Someone is working very hard to start a war. If it's Mars, then when you get on that ship, you'll never say another word in public that isn't fed to you by Martian handlers. I don't want to think it is Mars. I can't see how they would get anything out of a war. So my hope is that even after the Donager picks you up, you can still be a player in what follows. I am sending you a keyword. Next time you broadcast publicly, use the word ubiquitous within the first sentence of the broadcast to signal that you're not being coerced. Don't use it, and I'll assume you are. Either way, I want you to know you have allies in the Belt. I don't know who or what you were before, but your voice matters now. If you want to use that voice to make things better, I will do anything I can to help you do it. If you get free, contact me at the address that follows. I think maybe you and I have a lot to talk about. Johnson out." The crew sat in the galley, drinking a bottle of ersatz tequila Amos had scrounged from somewhere. Shed was politely sipping from a small cup of it and trying to hide his grimace each time. Alex and Amos drank like sailors, a fingerful in the bottom of the cup tossed back all at once. Alex had a habit of saying, "Hoo boy," after each shot. Amos just used a different profanity each time. He was up to his 11th shot and so far hadn't repeated himself. Holden stared at Naomi. She swirled the tequila in her cup and stared back. He found himself wondering what sort of genetic mashup had produced her features. Definitely some African and South American in there. Her last name hinted at Japanese ancestry, which was only barely visible as a slight epicanthic fold. She'd never been conventionally pretty, but from the right angle she was actually fairly striking. Shit, I'm drunker than I thought. To cover, he said, So, Colonel Johnson is calling you now. Quite the important man you've become, sir," Naomi replied. Amos put down his cup with exaggerated care. "Been meaning to ask about that, sir. Any chance we might take up his offer of help and just head back to the belt?" he said. "Don't know about you, but with a Martian battleship in front and the half-dozen mystery ships behind, it's starting to feel pretty fucking crowded out here." Alex snorted. "Are you kidding? If we flipped now, we'd be just about stopped by the time the Donager caught up to us. She's burning the furniture to catch us before the Belter ships do. If we start heading their direction, the Donny might take that as a sign we've switched teams, frag the whole lot of us." "I agree with Mr. Kamal," Holden said. "We've picked our course, and we're going to see it through. I won't be losing Fred's contact information anytime soon. Speaking of which, have you deleted his message yet, Naomi?" "Yes, sir. Scrubbed it from the ship's memory with steel wool. The Martians will never know he talked to us." Holden nodded and unzipped his jumpsuit a little further. The galley was starting to feel very hot with 5 drunk people in it. Naomi raised an eyebrow at his days-old T-shirt. Embarrassed, he zipped back up. "Those ships don't make any sense to me, boss," Alex said. "A half-dozen ships flying kamikaze missions with nukes strapped to their hulls might make a dent in a battle wagon like the Donny, but not much else would. She opens up with her point defense network and rail guns, she can create a no-fly zone 1,000 clicks across. They could be killing those 6 ships with torpedoes already, except I think they're as confused about who they are as we are." "They'll know they can't catch us before the Donager picks us up," Holden said. "And they can't take her in a fight. So I don't know what they're up to." Amos poured the last of the tequila into everyone's cups and held his up in a toast. "I guess we'll fucking find out." Chapter 10. Miller. Captain Shadid tapped the tip of her middle finger against her thumb when she started getting annoyed. It was a small sound, soft as a cat's paws, but ever since Miller first noticed her habit, it had seemed louder. Quiet as it was, it could fill her office. "Miller," she said, smiling as if she meant it. "We're all on edge these days. These have been hard, hard times." "Yes, sir," Miller said, lowering his head like a fullback determined to muscle his way through all defenders. "But I think this is important enough to deserve closer—" "It's a favor for a shareholder," Shadid said. Her father got jumpy. There's no reason to think he meant Mars blasting the Canterbury. Tariffs are going up again, there was a mine blowout on one of the Red Moon operations, Eros is having trouble with their yeast farm. We don't go through a day without something happening in the belt that would make a daddy scared for his precious little flower. "Yes, sir, but the timing—" Her fingers upped tempo. Miller bit his lips. The cause was lost. "Don't go chasing conspiracies," Shadid said. "We've got a full board of crimes we know are real. Politics, war, system-wide cabals of interplanet bad guys searching for ways to screw us over, not our mandate. Just get me a report that says you're looking. I'll send it back up the line and we can get back to our jobs." "Yes, sir." "Anything else?" "No, sir." Shadid nodded and turned back to her terminal. Miller plucked his hat from the corner of her desk and headed out. One of the station house air filters had gone bad over the weekend. and the replacement gave the rooms a reassuring smell of new plastic and ozone. Miller sat at his desk, fingers laced behind his head, and stared at the light fixture above him. The knot that had tied itself in his gut hadn't loosened up. That was too bad. Not so good, then? Havelock asked. Could have gone better. She pull the job? Miller shook his head. No, it's still mine. She just wants me to do it half-assed. Could be worse. At least you get to find out what happened. And if you maybe spend a little time after hours digging into it just for practice, you know. Yeah, Miller said. Practice. Their desks were unnaturally clean, his and Havelock's both. The barrier of paperwork Havelock had created between himself and the station had eroded away, and Miller could tell from his partner's eyes and the way his hands moved that the cop in Havelock wanted to get back into the tunnels. He couldn't tell if it was to prove himself before his transfer went through, or just to break a few heads. Maybe those were two ways of saying the same thing. Just don't get yourself killed before you get out of here, Miller thought. Aloud, he said, What have we got? Hardware shop, Sector 8, third level in, Havelock said. Extortion complaint. Miller sat for a moment, considering his own reluctance as if it belonged to someone else. It was like Shadid had given a dog just one bite of fresh meat, then pointed it back toward kibble. The temptation to blow off the hardware shop bloomed, and for a moment he almost gave in. Then he sighed, swung his feet down to the decking, and stood. All right, then, he said. Let's go make the station safe for commerce. Words to live by, Havelock said, checking his gun. He'd been doing that a lot more recently. The shop was an entertainment franchise. Clean, white fixtures offering up custom rigs for interactive environments, battle simulations, exploration games, sex. A woman's voice ululated on the sound system, somewhere between an Islamic call to prayer and orgasm, with a drumbeat. Half the titles were in Hindi with Chinese and Spanish translations. The other half were English with Hindi as the second language. The clerk was hardly more than a boy, 16, 17 years old, with a weedy black beard he wore like a badge. Can I help you? The boy said, eyeing Havelock with disdain just short of contempt. Havelock pulled his ID, making sure the kid got a good long look at his gun when he did it. We'd like to talk to... Miller glanced at the complaint form on his terminal screen. Asher Kamamatsu. He here? The manager was a fat man for a belter. Taller than Havelock, the man carried fat around his belly and thick muscles through the shoulders, arms, and neck. If Miller squinted, he could see the 17-year-old boy he had been under the layers of time and disappointment, and it looked a lot like the clerk out front. The office was almost too small for the three of them and stacked with boxes of pornographic software. You'll catch them? The manager said. No, Miller said, still trying to figure out who they are. Damn it, I already told you. There's pictures of them off the store camera. I gave you his fucking name. Miller looked at his terminal. The suspect was named Mateo Judd, a dock worker with an unspectacular criminal record. You think it's just him, then? Miller said. All right, we'll just go pick him up, throw him in the can. No reason for us to find out who he's working for. Probably no one who'll take it wrong, anyway. My experience with these protection rackets, the purse boys get replaced when everyone goes down, but since you're sure this guy's the whole problem... The manager's sour expression told Miller he'd made his point. Havelock, leaning against a stack of boxes marked Siret Livia Divushki, smiled. Why don't you tell me what he wanted? Miller said. I already told the last cop, the manager said. Tell me. He was selling us a private insurance plan. $100 a month, same as the last guy. Last guy? Havelock said. So this happened before? Sure, the manager said. Everyone has to pay some, you know. Price of doing business. Miller closed his terminal, frowning. Philosophical, but if it's the price of doing business, what are we here for? Because I thought you people had this shit under control. Ever since we stopped paying the Loca, I've been able to turn a decent profit. Now it's all starting up again." "Hold on," Miller said. "You're telling me the Loca Grega stopped charging protection?" "Sure. Not just here. Half the guys I know in the bow just stopped showing up. We figured the cops had actually done something for once. Now we've got these new bastards, and it's the same damn thing all over again." A crawling feeling made its way up Miller's neck. He looked up at Havelock, who shook his head. He hadn't heard of it either. The Golden Bow Society, Sohiro's crew, the Loca Grega, all the organized crime on Ceres suffering the same ecological collapse. And now someone new moving into the evacuated niche. Might be opportunism, might be something else. He almost didn't want to ask the next questions. Havelock was going to think he was paranoid. "How long has it been since the old guys called on you for protection?" Miller asked. "I don't know. Long time? Before or after Mars killed that water hauler?" The manager folded his thick arms. His eyes narrowed. "Before," he said. "Maybe a month or two. What's that got to do with anything?" "Just trying to get the time scale right," Miller said. "The new guy, Mateo, he tell you who was backing his new insurance plan?" "That's your job figuring it, right?" The manager's expression had closed down so hard Miller imagined he could hear the click. Yes, Asher Kamamatsu knew who was shaking him down. He had balls enough to squeak about it, but not to point the finger. Interesting. "Well, thanks for that," Miller said, standing up. "We'll let you know what we find." "Glad you're on the case," the manager said, matching sarcasm for sarcasm. In the exterior tunnel, Miller stopped. The neighborhood was at the friction point between sleazy and respectable. White marks showed where graffiti had been painted over. Men on bicycles swerved and weaved, foam wheels humming on the polished stone. Miller walked slowly, his eyes on the ceiling high above them until he found the security camera. He pulled up his terminal, navigated to the logs that matched the camera code, and cross-referenced the time code from the store's still frames. For a moment, he thumbed the controls, speeding people back and forth. And there was Mateo, coming out of the shop. A smug grin deformed the man's face. Miller froze the image and enhanced it. Havelock, watching over his shoulder, whistled low. The split circle of the OPA was perfectly clear on the thug's armband. The same kind of armband he'd found in Julie Mao's hole. "What kind of company have you been keeping, kid?" Miller thought. "You're better than this. You have to know you're better than this." "Hey, partner," he said aloud. "Think you can write up the report on that interview? I've got something I'd like to do. Might not be too smart to have you there. No offense." Havelock's eyebrows crawled toward his hairline. "You're going to question the OPA?" "Shake some trees is all," Miller said. Miller would have thought that just being a security contractor in a known OPA convivial bar would be enough to get him noticed. In the event, half the faces he recognized in the dim light of John Rock Gentlemen's Club were normal citizens. More than one of those were Star Helix, just like him, when they were on duty. The music was pure belter, soft chimes accompanied by zither and guitar with lyrics in half a dozen languages. He was on his fourth beer, 2 hours past the end of his shift and on the edge of giving up his plan as a losing scheme, when a tall, thin man sat down at the bar next to him. Acne-pocked cheeks gave a sense of damage to a face that otherwise seemed on the verge of laughter. It wasn't the first OPA armband he'd seen that night, but it was worn with an air of defiance and authority. Miller nodded. "I heard you've been asking about the OPA," the man said. "Interested in joining up?" Miller smiled and lifted his glass, an intentionally non-committal gesture. "You who I'd talk to if I did?" he asked, his tone light. "Might be able to help." "Maybe you could tell me about a couple other things then," he said, taking out his terminal and putting it on the fake bamboo bar with an audible click. Mateo Judd's picture glowed on the screen. The OPA man frowned, turning the screen to see it better. "I'm a realist," Miller said. "When Chucky Snails was running protection, I wasn't above talking to his men. When the Hand took over, and then the Golden Bough Society after them. My job isn't to stop people from bending the rules. It's to keep Ceres stable. You understand what I'm saying?" "I can't say I do," the pockmarked man said. His accent made him sound more educated than Miller had expected. "Who is this man?" "His name's Mateo Judd. He's been starting a protection business in Sector 8. Says it's backed by the OPA." "People say things, Detective. It is detective, isn't it? But you were discussing realism. If the OPA is making a move on the Ceres black economy, it's going to be better all around if we can talk to each other. Communicate." The man chuckled and pushed the terminal back. The bartender paced by, a question in his eyes that wasn't asking if they needed anything. It wasn't meant for Miller. "I had heard that there was a certain level of corruption in Star Helix," the man said. "I admit I'm impressed by your straightforward manner. I'll clarify. The OPA isn't a criminal organization." "Really? My mistake. I figured from the way it killed a lot of people." "You're baiting me. We defend ourselves against people who are perpetrating economic terrorism against the Belt. Earthers, Martians. We are in the business of protecting Belters," the man said. "Even you, Detective." "Economic terrorism?" Miller said. "That seems a little overheated." "You think so? The inner planets look on us as their labor force. They tax us, they direct what we do. They enforce their laws and ignore ours in the name of stability. In the last year they've doubled the tariffs to Titania, 5,000 people on an ice ball orbiting Neptune months from anywhere. The sun's just a bright star to them. Do you think they're in a position to get redress? They've blocked any Belter freighters from taking Europa contracts. They charge us twice as much to dock at Ganymede. The science station on Phoebe? We aren't even allowed to orbit it. There isn't a Belter in the place. Whatever they do there, we won't find out until they sell the technology back to us 10 years from now." Miller sipped his beer and nodded toward his terminal. "So, this one isn't yours?" "No, he isn't." Miller nodded and put the terminal back in his pocket. Oddly, he believed the man. He didn't hold himself like a thug. The bravado wasn't there. The sense of trying to impress the world. No, this man was certain and amused, and underneath it all, profoundly tired. Miller had known soldiers like that, but not criminals. "One other thing," Miller said. "I'm looking for someone." "Another investigation?" "Not exactly, no. Juliet Andromeda Mao. Goes by Julie." "Should I know the name?" "She's OPA," Miller said with a shrug. "Do you know everyone in Star Helix?" the man said, and when Miller didn't answer, he added, "We are considerably larger than your corporation." "Fair point," Miller said. "But if you could keep an ear out, I'd appreciate it." "I don't know that you're in a position to expect favors." "No harm asking." The pock-faced man chuckled, put a hand on Miller's shoulder. "Don't come back here, Detective," he said, and walked away into the crowd. Miller took another drink of his beer, frowning. An uncomfortable feeling of having made the wrong step fidgeted in the back of his mind. He'd been sure that the OPA was making a move on Ceres, capitalizing on the death of the water hauler and the Belt's uptick in fear and hatred of the inner planets. But how did that fit with Julie Mao's father and his suspiciously well-timed anxiety? Or the disappearance of Ceres Station's supply of usual suspects in the first place? Thinking about it was like watching a video that was just out of focus. The sense of it was almost there, but only almost. "Too many dots," Miller said. "Not enough lines." "Excuse me?" the bartender said. "Nothing," Miller said, pushing the half-empty bottle across the bar. "Thanks." In his hole, Miller turned on some music. The lyrical chants that Candace had liked, back when they were young and, if not hopeful, at least more joyful in their fatalism. He set the lights to half power, hoping that if he relaxed, if for just a few minutes he let go of the gnawing sense that he had missed some critical detail, the missing piece might arrive on its own. He'd half expected Candace to appear in his mind, sighing and looking crossly at him the way she had in life. Instead, he found himself talking with Julie Mao. In the half-sleep of alcohol and exhaustion, he imagined her sitting at Havelock's desk. She was the wrong age, younger than the real woman would be. She was the age of the smiling kid in her picture, the girl who had raced in the Razorback and won. He had the sense of asking her questions, and her answers had the power of revelation. Everything made sense. Not only the change in the Golden Bough Society and her own abduction case, but Havelock's transfer, the dead ice hauler, Miller's own life and work. He dreamed of Julie Mao laughing, and he woke up late, with a headache. Havelock was waiting at his desk. His broad, short, earther face seemed strangely alien, but Miller tried to shake it off. "You look like crap," Havelock said. "Busy night?" "Just getting old and drinking cheap beer," Miller said. One of the Vice Squad shouted something angry about her files being locked again, and a computer tech scuttled across the station house like a nervous cockroach. Havelock leaned closer, his expression grave. "Seriously, Miller," Havelock said. "We're still partners, and, honest to God, I think you may be the only friend I've got on this rock. You can trust me. If there's anything you want to tell me, I'm good." "That's great," Miller said. "But I don't know what you're talking about. Last night was a bust." "No OPA?" "Sure OPA. Any more, you swing a dead cat in this station, you'll hit 3 OPA guys. Just no good information." Havelock leaned back, lips pressed thin and bloodless. Miller's shrug asked a question, and the earther nodded toward the board. A new homicide topped the list. At 3 a.m, while Miller had been having inchoate dream conversations, someone had opened Mateo Judd's hole and fired a shotgun cartridge full of ballistic gel into his left eye. "Well," Miller said, "called that one wrong." "Which one?" Havelock said. "OPA's not moving in on the criminals," Miller said. "They're moving in on the cops."